The alien market was alive with noise. Bright lamps burned above wooden stalls, and strange creatures shouted prices in voices that echoed across the narrow streets. The smell of spices mixed with smoke and oil. Traders held up weapons, cloth, crystals, and even animals. But in the middle of all that chaos, there was one corner that seemed colder than the rest. There, inside a small iron cage, sat a child. Her skin glowed faintly in the light, a pale blue tone that marked her as not human. Large eyes shimmered with fear, and her thin arms wrapped around her knees as she tried to make herself small. Every time a buyer passed, the child pressed her forehead against her knees, wishing not to be seen. The traders shouted louder, trying to sell her. But no one stopped to look for long. She was unwanted merchandise. The crowd did not care. Some glanced and turned away. Others laughed cruelly at the idea of buying a child, and some shook their heads as if she was worthless. For the traders, she was just another object. For the people, she was nothing. But for one human woman, the sight cut deep into her chest. The woman's name was Alara. She had come to the market for food supplies and repair tools for her small ship. She walked with firm steps, her brown hair tied back, her eyes focused on the stalls. But when her gaze landed on the cage, she stopped. The sounds of the market grew distant. It was as if only the child and her trembling breath existed. Alara stepped closer. The trader, a large-scaled alien with greedy eyes, noticed her interest. "Fine specimen," he said, his voice low and rough. "She is quiet, obedient, and strong for her age. I will give you a fair price, human." Alara ignored his words. She crouched near the cage. The child lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were wide shining pools of silver filled with terror but also a faint spark of hope. "Hello," Alara whispered, her voice soft, gentle, as if speaking to a frightened bird. The child did not answer. She only pressed herself tighter against the corner of the cage. Alara felt anger rising in her chest. How long had this child been here? How many people had walked past and chosen not to care? She placed her hand on the iron bars. The metal was cold. Behind those bars was not an object, it was a life. "Her mother abandoned her," the trader said quickly, trying to make the sale. "Weak, useless woman. Could not care for her. We took the child instead. Good deal, yes?" Alara's jaw tightened. The words stung. She looked back at the child, studying her thin frame, her shaking shoulders, the way her eyes begged for safety, though no words were spoken. She thought of the galaxy she had seen. Planets burned by war, cities broken by greed, and countless voices silenced by indifference. But here, in this single moment, she realized something. Sometimes the greatest battles were not fought with weapons. They were fought by choosing to care when no one else would. "How much?" Alara asked quietly. The trader grinned, showing sharp teeth. He named a price far too high, hoping to trick her. But Alara did not argue. She reached into her pouch and pulled out the credits. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the weight of the choice she was making. She could have walked away. She could have saved her money for her ship, for her food, for her safety. But something inside her refused to let the child remain in that cage. The trader counted the credits quickly and laughed with satisfaction. He unlocked the cage and pushed the door open with a loud creak. The child flinched, expecting another cruel hand to grab her. But instead she saw Alara kneel, her arms open, her face calm and kind. "It's all right," Alara whispered. "You're safe now." The child hesitated. Her body shook as if torn between fear and the desperate need for warmth. Slowly, carefully, she crawled out of the cage. When she reached Alara, she stopped just short of touching her. Alara smiled softly and placed a hand on the child's shoulder. The touch was gentle, careful, almost sacred. The child let out a breath she had been holding for too long, and tears slipped from her silver eyes. She collapsed against Alara, holding her tightly as if afraid she might vanish. Alara wrapped her arms around the small body, whispering words of comfort that the child could not fully understand, but could feel deep inside. The market noise returned around them, but it no longer mattered. For Alara, The world had narrowed, down to the child in her arms. For the child, the cage was gone, and for the first time, safety had a face, human, warm, and unshaken by cruelty. Ilara stood, holding the girl close. She glanced at the trader one last time, her eyes sharp with warning. Then she turned away, carrying the child through the crowded market, ignoring the whispers and stares that followed. Behind them, the empty cage sat in silence. But in that silence, something new had begun. A bond that crossed species, worlds, and fears. A bond that would change all of their lives forever. The journey back to Ilara's small ship was quiet. The alien child clung to her side, gripping her sleeve as if afraid that the market's shadows might reach out and drag her back into that cage. Every loud voice or sudden movement made her flinch. But Ilara's steady steps and calm presence carried her forward, away from the cruelty she had known. Inside the ship, the doors sealed with a soft hiss. The noise of the market faded into silence. The child looked around, her wide silver eyes, scanning the narrow space. The ship was not luxurious, it was simple, worn by years of travel. A small bed against the wall, shelves filled with tools and food containers, and a table with old star maps spread across it. But compared to the cage, it felt like a palace. Ilara crouched down to meet the child's gaze. "You're safe here," she said slowly, using a calm tone, hoping her words would carry meaning even if the child did not understand her language. The child tilted her head, still unsure. She pressed her hands together and kept silent. Ilara moved to a cabinet and took out a packet of food. She prepared something warm, simple stew with bread. The smell filled the room. When she set the bowl in front of the child, she waited. The girl hesitated, her hands trembling as if she expected the food to be snatched away. Then, carefully, she picked up a piece of bread and tasted it. Her eyes widened. For the first time, there was no fear in them, only surprise. She ate slowly at first, then faster, hunger breaking through the walls of caution. Ilara smiled faintly, watching her. "You've been starving," she whispered. After finishing, the child leaned back, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She looked at Ilara, her lips parting slightly, as though she wanted to say something. No sound came. She lowered her head, embarrassed. Ilara reached out, gently lifting the girl's chin. "It's all right. You don't have to speak if you don't want to." For a long moment, they simply sat in silence. Then the child moved closer and rested her head against Ilara's arm. The small gesture pierced Ilara's heart. She wrapped an arm around the girl's shoulders, holding her lightly. It was a fragile connection, but it was real. That night, the child refused to sleep alone. She curled up beside Ilara on the bed, her tiny frame shaking until sleep finally claimed her. Ilara stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind heavy with questions. Who was this child really? Why had her mother abandoned her? And why did she feel such a powerful pull to protect her, stronger than any mission or duty she had ever known? The following days brought small changes. The girl began to follow Ilara everywhere, into the engine room, the kitchen, even the cockpit. She watched closely, curious about everything. When Ilara repaired broken wires, the child reached out to hand her tools. When Ilara mapped stars, the girl leaned against her, staring at the glowing screen as though trying to learn. Bit by bit, trust grew between them. One morning, Ilara tried to teach her a word. She pointed to herself and said, "Ilara." She repeated it slowly. The girl blinked, then tried to mimic the sound. It came out soft and uneven, but it was enough. Ilara laughed gently, patting her head. Then Ilara pointed to the child, waiting. After a long pause, the girl whispered a sound, something like Sira. Her voice was fragile, unused, but it carried truth. It was her name. Ilara's chest tightened. "Sira," she repeated. The girl's eyes brightened. It was the first time she had shared her identity since leaving the cage. That moment marked the beginning of something deeper. Days turned into weeks. Ilara and Sira learned to communicate with simple words and gestures. Sierra's laughter began to echo inside the ship, a sound Ilara had never expected to hear. Yet beneath the joy, Ilara noticed the shadows in the girl's eyes. Sometimes, Sierra would wake in the night crying without sound, her body shaking from memories she could not erase. Ilara would hold her close, whispering comfort until the fear faded. And always there was the unspoken question in Ilara's mind. Where was Sierra's mother now? Was she alive, wandering the outskirts of the city? Or had she truly abandoned her daughter? One evening, as the twin moons rose outside the viewport, Ilara sat with Sierra wrapped in a blanket beside her. The stars stretched endlessly before them, distant and untouchable. Sierra leaned against her shoulder, whispering her name again. Ilara. Ilara closed her eyes. In that moment, she knew the bond was unbreakable. They were no longer just human and alien. They were something more. A family bound not by blood but by choice. But deep in the shadows of the city, unseen and unheard, another pair of eyes watched. Eyes that carried regret, sorrow, and longing. The true mother of the child had not disappeared. She was waiting, and soon she would step into their lives. The city slept under a blanket of dim neon lights. Broken towers leaned against the night sky, and the alleys carried whispers of forgotten lives. In one of those alleys, hidden among shadows, a figure watched silently. She was thin, her skin the same pale blue as the child's, though scarred and marked with years of suffering. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled. Her eyes, however, glowed with the same silver shimmer as her daughter's. They carried pain, regret, and something else. Hope she could not kill, no matter how deep her shame. This was Sierra's mother. She had followed Ilara from the market, keeping her distance. Every step the human took, every moment she held the child close was burned into the alien mother's heart. She wanted to rush forward, to take her daughter back into her arms, but fear chained her in place. Her name was Kira. Kira remembered the day the traders took her child. Weak, starving, hunted by debt collectors, she had no strength to fight. She had begged, screamed, but her voice was drowned by laughter. She had been beaten and cast aside, powerless as Sierra was locked in a cage. Since then, she had wandered the ruins, hiding like an animal, surviving on scraps. But every night her mind returned to her daughter's face. The wide silver eyes, the small hands reaching for her, the soundless cry for help. Guilt cut deeper than hunger ever could. When she saw the human woman at the market, something inside Kira shifted. Ilara's eyes were not cruel, her hands were not greedy. The way she touched Sierra's shoulder, the way she spoke gently, it had been different. Kira's heart broke as she watched her daughter leave in those arms, but it also sparked a fragile hope. Perhaps fate had given her child a chance she herself could not provide. Still, the question haunted her. Could she ever return to her daughter's side? From the shadows, Kira followed Ilara's ship when it left the market. She crept across, rooftops, climbed broken pipes, and watched the hangar from afar. Each night she waited, hidden in the dark, hoping to catch a glimpse of her child. And sometimes she did. Through a narrow gap in the wall, she saw Sierra laughing softly, her small hands tracing stars on the screen while Ilara guided her. She saw her eating warm food, saw her sleeping without fear. Each sight healed and wounded. Kira at the same time, her child was safe, but not with her. Kira whispered to herself in the shadows, "Forgive me, Sierra. I never wanted to leave you." Days passed, and the hunger in Kira's body grew, but her heart refused to leave. She would rather starve than lose her daughter completely. Still, she dared not approach the human. What if Ilara thought she was dangerous? What if she took Sierra away forever? One night, as the wind howled through the broken streets, Kira moved closer. She pressed her trembling hands against the cold wall of the ship. Her body shook with fear and weakness, but she stayed. For hours she sat there, leaning against the wall that separated her from her child, whispering lullabies only the night could hear. Inside, Sierra stirred in her sleep. Perhaps she sensed the voice of her mother, faint but near. She woke crying, and Alara comforted her quickly, unaware of the shadow sitting just outside. Kira's silver eyes filled with tears. She buried her face in her hands. She had failed, as a mother, and yet she could not stop being one. Her chance finally came on a quiet dawn. Alara stepped outside the ship, carrying broken parts to trade in the city. Kira stood hidden, her breath caught in her throat. This was her moment. But fear gripped her. Should she reveal herself? Should she beg for mercy? Her legs trembled as she took one step forward, then another. The morning light revealed her scars, her weak frame, her desperate eyes. Alara turned, sensing movement. Their gazes met. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Ilara's hand went to her side, ready to defend if needed. But she did not raise her weapon. She saw the silver eyes, the same as Sira's. She saw the sorrow carved into the alien woman's face. Something inside her whispered the truth. This was no threat. This was Sira's mother. Kira lowered her head, her voice breaking as she finally spoke. "Please, may I see her?" Her words were not a demand. They were a plea, heavy with guilt and longing. The question hung in the air like a fragile thread, waiting to break. Alara's heart tightened. Behind her calm expression, a storm of thoughts raged. Could she trust this broken woman? Could she risk letting her near the child she had sworn to protect? For now, she said nothing. But in that silence, suspense filled the air. A mother had returned from the shadows, and nothing would ever be the same again. The morning sun had only just begun to climb above the broken towers when Alara found herself face to face with the alien woman. Kira's thin frame stood trembling in the light, her torn clothes clinging to her body. Her eyes lowered as though she carried the weight of 1,000 regrets. Ilara's hand rested on her side, close to her weapon, but she did not draw it. She only stared at those silver eyes, so much like Sira's, and let the silence stretch. The air between them was heavy. Kira bowed her head lower. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse, broken from nights of hunger and endless fear. "I only want to see her. Just once." Alara's chest tightened. She could sense no threat in this woman. Her hands were shaking, her voice weak. Her entire body radiated desperation rather than danger. Still, the protector in Alara hesitated. The memory of the cage was fresh, and the thought of Sira being taken again clawed at her heart. "You're her mother," Alara said at last, her voice low but steady. Kira nodded, tears slipping down her scarred cheeks. "I never wanted to leave her. They took her. I was too weak to fight. I thought I lost her forever." Her words stumbled, each one heavy with shame. "But when I saw you take her, when I saw the way you held her, I knew she was safe, safer than with me." Alara's brows furrowed. She wanted to ask questions. Why had Kira not come sooner? Why had she let her child suffer? But as she looked into those trembling eyes, she saw the truth. This was a woman who had been crushed by life, who had lost everything yet still carried a mother's love burning inside her chest. Behind them, the ship door opened with a soft hiss. A small figure stepped out, rubbing her eyes. Sira blinked, in the sunlight, then froze when her gaze landed on the figure in the distance. For a moment she stood still, then recognition filled her eyes. Her small voice broke the air. "Mother?" The single word pierced Kira's heart like a blade. She covered her mouth with trembling hands as tears flooded her vision. Her body shook as she stumbled forward, but stopped short, too afraid to move closer without permission. Alara turned her head toward the child. Sira's eyes were wide, full of both joy and fear, as though she could not believe what she saw. Ilara's heart twisted. She knelt beside the girl, placing a hand on her shoulder. "That's her, isn't it?" she asked softly. Sira nodded, quickly, her voice breaking again. "Yes, she's my mother." The air grew heavier. Alara felt the choice pressing down on her shoulders. This was no simple moment, it was a turning point. Should she let this broken woman back into Sira's life? Or should she keep the child safe from the pain of betrayal? Kira's voice cracked through the silence. I will not take her from you. I only ask, let me be near her. Let me see her smile again. If she wants me gone, I will go. The words were humble, fragile, filled with sincerity. Kira dropped to her knees in the dust, lowering herself as though she had no right to stand tall. Her silver eyes pleaded not with Alara but with fate itself. Alara looked at her, then back at Sira. The child's small hands clutched her sleeve, but not in fear. Her eyes begged, not for protection, but for understanding. Please, Sira whispered. Don't send her away. The conflict inside Alara burned. She had sworn to protect this child, and her trust in strangers was thin. Yet she could not ignore the bond between mother and daughter. It was alive in front of her, undeniable. Finally, Alara took a long breath. You can stay for now. But if you hurt her, her eyes narrowed like steel. You'll answer to me. Kira bowed her head so deeply it almost touched the ground. Thank you, she whispered, her voice breaking with relief. Sira rushed forward, throwing her small arms around her mother. Kira held her tightly, sobbing into her daughter's hair. For the first time since the cage, Sira's tears were not of fear, but of joy. Alara stood back, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Inside, her chest was still heavy. She did not trust easily, and she knew danger still lingered in the city. Yet, as she watched mother and child embrace, a part of her softened. Perhaps this woman truly wanted nothing more than a chance to belong. When the embrace ended, Kira looked at Alara again, her voice trembling. I know I have no right to ask more, but may I stay with you? Not just today, not just for a moment. I have nothing, nowhere to go, only her. Please, let me stay. Her question hung in the air, more fragile than glass, more powerful than any demand. Alara's breath caught. This was no longer only about trust. It was about the future. The human woman, the alien child, and the broken mother stood together in the light of dawn. 3 lives pulled by fate into one path. And in that moment, the question of belonging had begun. Alara had faced battles before. She had crossed dangerous star systems, fought pirates, and survived storms on dead worlds. But this was harder. She stood at the threshold of her ship, her eyes fixed on the fragile figure kneeling in front of her. Kira's voice still echoed in her ears. Please, may I stay with you? The human's chest tightened. She looked at Sira, who clung to her mother's hand, silver eyes shining with hope. Then she looked at Kira, the alien mother who seemed too broken to harm anyone, yet carried scars that spoke of a dark past. This was the dilemma: trust or protect. If she allowed Kira to stay, she risked the safety of the child who had already suffered too much. But if she turned the woman away, she would crush the bond between mother and daughter. And something deep inside Alara whispered that such cruelty would haunt Sira for the rest of her life. Her thoughts churned. What if she betrays us? What if she brings danger to my ship? But what if I say no, and Sira never forgives me? Kira broke the silence, her voice trembling but firm. I do not want to take her from you. You saved her. You gave her life when I could not. I only asked to be near her to see her grow. Her words rang with truth, yet Alara's instincts screamed caution. She had lived too long among traitors, mercenaries, and liars to trust easily. She folded her arms, her eyes narrowing as she studied Kira carefully. You say you want to stay, but why now? Why wait until I found her? Alara asked. Kira's head bowed lower. Her thin fingers twisted together as shame washed over her. Because I was weak. Because I had nothing. When they took her, I tried to fight, but I was beaten. They left me broken in the streets. I thought I would never see her again. Then I saw you, human. You held her as if she was your own. I stayed in the shadows because I feared you would not believe me. Because I feared she would not forgive me. Her voice cracked. But she is my child, and I cannot leave again. Ilara's heart wrestled with itself. She wanted to push the woman away, to keep control, to protect the fragile trust she had built with Sira. But then Sira spoke. "Please, Ilara," the little girl whispered, her small hand gripping Ilara's sleeve. "Don't send her away. She is my mother. I love you, but I love her too." Those words cut deeper than any blade. Ilara had fought hard to earn the child's trust, to replace her fear with comfort. Yet now she realized she was standing in the middle of something greater than herself. Ilara turned away, her mind heavy. She walked a few paces, staring out at the ruined city beyond the hangar. The wind carried the scent of dust and smoke. She had seen so much cruelty in the galaxy, so many bonds broken for greed or power. Was she now about to break the most sacred bond of all, between mother and child? She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. In that silence, her choice formed. Ilara turned back. Her voice was steady, but her words cut like a blade. "You can stay, but hear me well. If you harm her, if you bring danger to this ship, I will not forgive you. Do you understand?" Kira raised her head, tears streaking down her scarred face. She nodded quickly, her voice breaking. "I swear, on my life, I will never harm her again." Relief flooded Sira's face. She rushed into her mother's arms, hugging her tightly. Kira held her as though afraid she might vanish. The two cried together, their tears mixing, their bond rekindled. Ilara stood back, arms crossed, watching them. She told herself this was the right decision, though unease still lingered. Trust would not come easily. It would have to be earned. But for Sira's sake, she had given them a chance. Inside the ship, the atmosphere changed. Kira walked cautiously, her steps slow as if afraid she would break something simply by being there. She looked around with wide eyes, overwhelmed by the safety her daughter had found. Sira never left her side, guiding her through the narrow halls, showing her the small treasures Ilara had given her. But even as warmth filled the air, Ilara felt a storm building deep inside her chest. She had made a choice for Sira, but had she made it for herself? Could she truly live with this woman in her ship, sharing the same space, carrying the same risks? That night, Ilara sat alone in the cockpit, staring at the stars. She remembered Sira's smile, Kira's broken voice, and her own silent promise to protect them both. The dilemma had not ended with her decision. It had only begun. Because in the galaxy, nothing stayed safe for long. The days that followed were uneasy. Inside the small ship, 3 lives moved together in a fragile balance. Sira was filled with joy, her laughter echoing through the narrow halls as she clung to both her mother and Ilara. But beneath that laughter, tension lingered, Ilara's guarded watchfulness, and Kira's quiet shame. Ilara worked on repairs, her hands busy with wires and circuits, while her mind never stopped questioning. Each time she glanced at Kira, she studied her carefully. Was this woman truly as broken as she seemed? Or was there danger hidden beneath her gentle eyes? Kira noticed the weight of that stare. She did not complain, did not argue. She only lowered her head and tried to prove herself in small ways. She cleaned the ship's corners, cooked what little food she could, and never left Sira's side. She seemed determined to show Ilara she had no plans to harm them. But even with her efforts, the distance remained. Ilara's heart could not let go of caution. One night, the ship floated in silence above a barren moon. Outside the window, the stars shimmered like frozen fire. Inside, the child had already fallen asleep, curled in a blanket between the two women. Ilara sat awake, staring at the stars. Kira sat across from her, her hands folded tightly in her lap. For a long time, neither spoke. The hum of the ship's engine was the only sound. Finally, Kira's voice broke the silence. "You do not trust me." Ilara turned her eyes to her. "Trust is not given. It is earned." Kira nodded, her head lowering. "And I will earn it, even if it takes my whole life." Her words trembled, but they carried a truth that made Ilara pause. Moments passed, then Kira stood and slowly walked closer. Her body shook, her steps weak, but her eyes held determination. She knelt before Ilara, her hands pressed against the floor, her head bowed. Ilara stiffened, unsure what this was. "What are you doing?" Kira's voice was barely a whisper, softer than the hum of the ship. "Can I stay with you too?" The words hung in the air, fragile yet powerful, carrying the weight of all her fear and longing. Ilara froze. The question pierced through her chest like an arrow. It was not just about shelter. It was not only about Sira. It was about belonging, about a woman who had lost everything, asking if she could still be worth something. For a long moment, Ilara said nothing. Her mind swirled with doubt. She thought of the risks, the dangers, the unknown past this woman carried. Yet she also thought of Sira, her laughter, her joy, the way she glowed with both mother and protector by her side. Could she take that away? Ilara's throat tightened. She wanted to keep her walls up, to remain strong and unshaken, but the whisper cut through those walls. It was not a demand. It was not manipulation. It was the cry of a heart desperate for redemption. Kira stayed kneeling, her head still bowed, tears slipping silently down her scarred face. She dared not look up, as if the answer might destroy her. Finally, Ilara reached out. Slowly, carefully, she lifted Kira's chin until their eyes met. Silver eyes shimmered with fear and hope. "You may stay," Ilara said at last, her voice steady but soft. "But know this. I will protect Sira with everything I have. If you harm her, if you betray her, I will not forgive you." Kira's breath caught. Tears spilled freely as she whispered, "I would never harm her again, I swear it." Ilara studied her face for a long moment. She saw no lies there, only brokenness and a desperate longing to belong. Slowly, she let go of her chin and leaned back. Sira stirred in her sleep, rolling closer to her mother. Kira gently wrapped her arms around the child, holding her close. For the first time in years, she felt whole again, and Ilara, though still guarded, felt something shift inside her chest. That whisper had changed everything. From that moment, the three of them were no longer strangers bound by chance. They were something more. A fragile family, born not of blood but of choice. Yet Ilara knew the galaxy was cruel. The market traders would not forget the loss of their merchandise. Shadows still lurked in the city. Danger would come, sooner or later, but when it came, they would face it together. And for the first time, Ilara believed that maybe, just maybe, they could win. The days that followed felt different inside the ship. The silence that once filled its narrow halls was now broken by voices, footsteps, and the sound of laughter that echoed softly between the steel walls. For the first time, Ilara's ship did not feel like a lonely vessel drifting through the void. It felt alive. Sira woke each morning with joy, moving quickly between Ilara and her mother. She wanted both hands to hold hers, both arms to wrap around her small frame. The child no longer looked like the trembling figure in the cage. Her smile was brighter, her voice stronger, her eyes full of light. Kira stayed close, careful with every gesture. She cleaned, cooked, and mended clothes with steady hands as though each small act was her offering of gratitude. Yet she carried herself humbly, never forgetting that she had been given a chance she did not deserve. Every night she whispered thanks under her breath, though she never said it aloud. Ilara watched all of this with cautious eyes. At first she remained distant, her walls high. She told herself she was only protecting Sira, only keeping watch, for signs of danger. But slowly, without meaning to, she felt her edges soften. She saw the way Sira rested peacefully against her mother, how the girl's nightmares faded when Kira sang her quiet songs. She saw the way Kira's eyes carried no deceit, only guilt and a desperate need to make things right. One evening, as the ship floated through a starfield, Ilara stood at the cockpit window. The stars stretched like endless rivers of fire. She felt Sira tug at her sleeve. The child looked up, smiling. "Ilara," Sira said softly, pointing to the stars. "Home?" The word struck Ilara. Home. She had never thought of the ship that way. To her it was a tool, a shield, a place to rest, before moving again. But when she looked back and saw Kira holding Sira, their faces calm and safe, she realized something. This was home. Not the walls, not the steel, but the people inside it. That night, as they shared a small meal, Kira finally spoke the words she had carried for so long. "You saved her," she whispered, her eyes on Alara. "And you saved me. I cannot repay that. But I want you to know. I am not here to take her from you. You are part of her now. You are family." Alara froze. The word family echoed inside her chest, shaking her in ways battles and storms never had. She glanced at Sira, who nodded eagerly, smiling with innocence. "Yes," the child said brightly. "Family." The tension that had hung between them began to fade. Slowly a new bond formed, not only between mother and daughter, but between the three of them. They learned to share duties, to share space, to share silence without fear. Trust was no longer a distant hope. It was beginning to grow. But outside their small ship, the galaxy was not silent. Whispers of traders losing profit, of a human woman stealing merchandise began to spread through the city. Alara knew enemies might come searching. She prepared quietly, sharpening her weapons, reinforcing the ship's shields, ready for the storm she knew would one day arrive. Yet even in that preparation, she felt stronger than before. She was no longer alone. She had two lives depending on her, two hearts giving her purpose beyond survival. And that changed everything. One final moment sealed it. On a quiet morning, Sira ran through the hall, her small footsteps echoing as she laughed. She stumbled, nearly falling, but two sets of hands caught her, one human, one alien. She looked up, giggling, holding both their hands at once. "Together," she said simply. Alara met Kira's eyes over the child's head. For the first time, neither suspicion nor guilt remained, only understanding. "Yes," Alara said softly. "Together." Kira nodded, her lips trembling into a smile. "A home for three." The words were gentle, but they carried the power of truth. They were no longer just a broken mother, a frightened child, and a guarded human. They were something greater, a family created not by fate but by choice. As the ship drifted into the endless sea of stars, its lights glowing against the darkness, the three sat together in silence, not the silence of fear, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of belonging. Whatever storms awaited, whatever dangers would rise, they would face them side by side. Because in the vast galaxy, in a universe filled with cruelty and greed, one truth had been written in the bond between them. Humanity's greatest gift was not strength or power. It was the ability to make a home, even in the coldest void, and to turn strangers into family. And so their journey continued, not as one, not as two, but as three.